Hi, this is Bala Parthasarathy, and welcome to our podcast, Intelligence Unscripted.
So today I have with me Harsh Sethi. Harsh is the managing director at Peak 15 Partners, and Harsh's specialty is to look at AI. So today we're going to be talking about AI and his worldview. So Harsh, let's start with this. What is your AI thesis, and how have you kind of acted on it?
Thank you, Bala, for having me here, and excited to talk to you about sort of what we're doing in the world of AI. Of course, this is a very predominant theme for us, and we're spending a lot of time on it. I'll sort of split our AI investments up into two buckets. The first bucket is sort of infrastructure, and the second bucket is applications, and we'll talk to you about each of these. So on the infrastructure side, we think about companies like Sarvam. I'm sure we'll sort of talk about that company in a bit. Where there's an opportunity to build something where people can sort of, build on top of the AI stack more easily, right? So in the case of Sarvam, we were attracted by the opportunity for people to build applications in Indic languages. Similarly, there's sort of, all these open source projects and others that exist that allow developers to much more easily sort of, port the existing application into building something on AI. We think there will be a couple of these in India, but we think there will be far more on the application layer. And I think that's probably where we're spending more of our time and sort of, in tune with the market. On the application side, I'd say there's essentially sort of, three buckets of companies that we're looking at. I think the first bucket of companies is those that are reimagining a category using AI. So one of the things I like to say is that AI is perhaps one of the first technological revolutions where there isn't innovator's dilemma.
What do you mean by that?
Right. So innovator's dilemma is basically sort of, a tendency for an incumbent company to not make changes because they will cannibalize the existing product. So, in the era of cloud, folks that were used to selling licenses and on-prem had to make a pretty significant change to their accounting structure, to their P&L if they move to a subscription revenue stream. And that gave the opportunity for companies to exist. Same thing with sort of, the transition to mobile, in terms of not investing enough in these. I think because AI is considered is a mainstream belief that it is the next platform of the future, all companies are investing in it. In fact, they're using this to increase sort of, their price that they're charging customers, saying that, we will automate, and we are now providing you more features, and therefore let us charge you more. And so because, that doesn't exist, existing companies are sort of, very in tune with what's going on. They're competing just as strongly with startups. And therefore, I think the opportunity is for companies that are building something new.
What do you mean by that? Give an example.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of a company that we sort of, have led the seed in. This is a company called Interpret, where we have led the seed investment alongside Kleiner Perk in the US. This is a Bangalore, New York company. And what the company does is it reimagines Qualtrics. So Qualtrics, as you know, is basically a tool that allows companies to survey their users. So oftentimes, when companies want to get feedback from their customer, they'll send you a form. The form will have an NPS question. It will have a few other sort of, parameters, and you basically analyze that. But if you think about it in the world of LLMs, the whole idea of sending a form is antiquated, right? Because as a customer, I may be giving feedback to a business at many points. If I'm calling in, for customer support, I may be talking a little bit about the product and what I like, what I don't like. I may be putting out sort of, something on social media. When someone is making a sales pitch, they're again sort of, interacting, you're trying to upsell a customer. So actually you get feedback from a customer at all points in time. I think the challenge is that people never had a way of being able to summarize that feedback, present it in a way that's sort of, useful for a company to ingest. But now in the world of LLMs, actually you can take all of this data and be able to sort of, create pithy insights from it. And that's sort of, a way in which that company is going after an existing market, but not by building a better way of doing surveys. They're not sort of creating a tool that allows you to automate writing of survey questions. They're saying, actually, if the goal is to get feedback from customers, what's the way in which I can do it today that was not possible sort of, previously? So that's sort of, one type of business that we like, and we're sort of, looking at, similar businesses in other categories. I think the second one is sort of, the type of business that takes advantage of the India sort of, history and sort of, our legacy and sort of what we can build. And what I mean by that is, India has had sort of, a rich history of services, our IT revolution, our KPO, BPO revolution. There are all of these existing businesses, and many people talk about the fact that they will get fundamentally disrupted with AI. But I think we're at a point where the technology is very good at automating, let's say 80%, 85%, 90%, but it can't automate 100%, right? And oftentimes for businesses, when they have something that faces the end customer, they really need something to be pretty perfect if it's facing your customer. And so we like the combination of companies that are thinking about building a new age services company using AI. So we recently invested in a company that's trying to reimagine IT services using AI. And so what they're doing is, it's a similar sort of client-facing model, is similar sort of consulting-led model where they're figuring out what is the solution to be built. But thanks to what's possible in terms of Copilot, others, in terms of code writing, that sort of end-to-end process in terms of what it costs and how quickly it can be delivered, that can be sort of made faster. So that's another sort of services plus software type business that we are sort of keen about, and we think that has a unique advantage of existing from India. And I'd say sort of the third category is the type of businesses that essentially are making things that were previously harder easier. So we are invested in a company called InVideo, for example, that essentially allows people to create videos. But one of the things that was friction for them was actually sort of writing the prompt itself to generate the video. But now, thanks to sort of what's possible with AI, that piece in terms of creating directions of what exactly the video should do, that's become easier. And so that's another type of business that we are looking at and keen on, where you're taking one part of sort of the workflow and you're using AI to make that simpler. And that usually the part that you're making simpler is the part that had the highest friction.
Fascinating. So I want to come back to especially the IT services part, because given we're in India, there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there, and this is a very thing that we don't talk about normally. But I know like you've been thinking about it, so I want to double click on that one, and I also want to talk about some of the risks that you see in each of these categories.
Right.
But I just want to quickly summarize what I make sure I heard it right. You're basically saying there are infrastructure plays, and there'll be a few of them coming out of India, not a whole lot. Serverm is a good example of one. And then the application. In the application, you see sort of three broad categories. One is somebody reimagining an existing workflow, right? Like you saw with the surveys, like how not a better questionnaire, but completely rethink it. The second is IT services 2.0, if I can call it that, right? Just completely reimagined IT services, the age of Gen AI. And third is like new things that we never thought was possible, right?
Yeah.
Only possible with Gen AI.
Right.
That's an excellent characterization. And before we come back to the IT services, I don't know, what are the risks that you see? Because you're an investor. Are there timing risks? Are we too early to the market in some of these things? I know you have patient capital,
right,
in general, but how do you view what do you see the challenges?
Yeah, I'd say, essentially, I view sort of challenges in two buckets. The first challenge is, the challenge of disruption. So, this market moves at an alarmingly quick pace. It is, it's a fascinating industry to sort of, be a part of and watch sort of how quickly people are building and the cool stuff people are building. But one thing we ask ourselves is, hey, we're investing in this company today. Is this going to be relevant in 6 months? Like, are there others that will sort of, essentially do something similar? And what happens if
OpenAI itself,
OpenAI does it, one of the hyperscaler does it, like what sort of possible for us? And so I think that's one. I think the second is we think a lot about sort of are there real dollars in terms of budget that are going behind it? I think today in every boardroom there's a question of what's your AI strategy, which is fantastic. And we are at this point where companies are thinking about budgets. But a lot of budgets today are sort of, in the experimental camp. They want to sort of, wait and watch and see, what type of results they can get before they commit sort of, real dollars. And so hopefully, as the technology evolves and, people sort of, are happy with sort of the products and the pilots that they run, that we'll start to see that. But today that's also, a challenge where there's a lot of interest. There is money, but the nature of the money is a little bit more experimental.
So Harsh, I'm hearing two types of risks. One is sort of a technology disruption risk, right? Like OpenAI launching something, Google launching something, hyperscalers launching something. So that's one risk. And secondly, when are the real dollars going to get behind all of this?
Yeah.
Right? Because ultimately these companies need to make profits.
Absolutely. Actually, I'll add one more, which is sort of, and this is perhaps true of many businesses, but again, I'll characterize it, going back to the innovator's dilemma point I was making, which is, the risk of, of distribution. So, again, sort of if I compare and contrast with sort of, revolutions of the past, they have created new channels of distribution. The internet created a new channel of distribution. Mobile created a new channel of distribution. With AI, actually, there's no new channel of distribution. So, you have to figure out a distribution strategy in a market that, you are sort of, competing with incumbents and new players. And so what is your distribution edge or strategy is another sort of thing that, is relevant for many businesses, but unlike sort of, new age companies in the past that were sort of riding a mega trend, this trend has that peculiarity of not creating a new channel of distribution.
The fascinating lens to look at it, especially if you're thinking of consumer plays.
Right.
Just coming back to Servo. Servo is one of your bigger bets,
right?
What led you to it?
Yeah, we were, seed investors in the company, and perhaps the first the people to give a term sheet to the company. And when we met Vivek and Pratyush, I think there was sort of two aspects that appealed to us. One is the founders themselves, and the second is sort of what they're looking to build. So I think on the founders, one of the things I really sort of thought about as I came out of meeting them was this duality of having extreme ambition. They sort of want to build something that is really making AI accessible to 500 million Indians, but there is a humility about them in terms of how they're approaching it, right? And so they are keen to learn. They don't feel like they know a lot, despite sort of their credentials. Both of them very well, and Vivek sort of is responsible for shaping Aadhaar to what it is. Pratyush is a very accomplished AI researcher, and professor. And so despite sort of being luminaries in the industry, there is sort of humility to them, but there is extreme ambition, saying that if you're doing this, then we want to do something that's extremely large, right? The second thing, of course, that appealed to us was what they're going after. The premise that we will sort of need Indic language LLMs made a ton of sense to us. Their idea that the reason they can build a better model is not because they will build a bigger model than OpenAI or Anthropic or any of these existing players, but that they will do it because they are actually collecting proprietary data that allows them to sort of train models on Indian languages better. And then they are focused on this lens of application, saying that if your inference costs are very high on per user, per task basis, this is something that will not fly in India. So how can you do something that allows people to use AI at the cheapest possible cost? And when we thought about sort of what it would take for AI to exist at a main scale in India, like that certainly felt like a thesis that resonated with us. And so pretty quickly after sort of the first real meeting with us, we were like, we are ready to be investors, and we were keen to partner with them. And it's been we've been working very closely together for the last several months now, and it's been a fun journey with them.
Yeah, they're definitely very, very high quality people. That's for sure. No, what about the risks? Like I'm always going to ask you, like the other side of the equation.
Absolutely.
You're an investor. You walk in with your eyes open.
Yeah.
So obviously there are great things, but what are the things that you'd be worried about?
I think the thing that's sort of top of mind again is sort of they're building infrastructure, and so the thing that enables infrastructure to scale is application that scale. And so what we need in India are some of these applications that are leveraging these LLMs that Sarvam is building to be able to scale. And so more recently you may have seen sort of demos that they have. One was actually in terms of collecting feedback. The other was sort of an education use case. And so one of the things they're constantly thinking about is that we know we can build some great technology on this, but we also have to seed the ecosystem to start using this technology. And once that flywheel starts to kick about, I think we'll see success of the company. So I think that's something that is constantly top of mind for us at this stage of the company.
And as an investor, and you guys have a surge program,
right?
All of this can also plays in, right? Like your own portfolio can.
Absolutely. One thing we're sort of actively thinking about is for some of our scale companies actually can have very interesting use cases. what's the angle of collaboration that's possible.
Oh, excellent. So in terms as an investor, you're seeing deals, you're seeing smart people walk in, sit in this office all the
Yeah.
time.
Right.
What are some of the companies or types of companies you did not invest in? Like if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, you need to know what the investor, thinks when they walk
Yeah.
out of the room saying, good people, but I'm not sure. What would you not be sure about in the AI space?
Yeah, I'd say, two types of examples come to mind. I think the first is, we met a founder, very ambitious, early to the AI trend, very smart. But sort of the problem statement that they were going after was one that, had, at least 20 competitors we knew of globally that were all trying to sort of, build something in the space. And we realized that if this company works, it's a massive company in the making, but it was unclear what the differentiation is. Partly because, categories moving fast, partly because, everybody's at the same stage thinking about sort of, the same problems. And when we spoke to some companies in our portfolio that are perhaps sort of, more advanced in their AI usage, we heard similar things saying, hey, we've had a number of these companies come and pitch to us. We're unsure sort of, which one to go with at this point. And so we said, one of the luxuries we have is that we are a multi-stage fund, and so we can invest in the seed stage, but we can certainly invest at later stages. And what's the right risk reward for us to invest? We said, hey, let's just wait for there to be more clarity in what the competitive dynamics in the category is. I think the second type of company is ones that have seen some real traction, but in terms of the reason for the traction, I think is oftentimes the first mover advantage, but sort of, this wrapper on top of, the LLM companies is basically something that we've seen, heard. And so I think we think a lot about sort of, what the moat is in the business that you're building. And the moat can come from workflow, it can come from data, but there needs to be, I'm talking in the context of enterprise application, but there needs to be something that sort of, allows you to build something that's perhaps a deeper solution for the pain point that you're addressing.
So if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, so it cannot be just a me too play. That's
Right.
what I'm hearing Harsh say. Even if you're smart, assume you're smart and aggressive, just cannot like, okay, I'm just going to copy the idea and just expect people to, give me money. Or you cannot just put a thin wrapper on GPT and the next version you'll become obsolete.
Right.
Just put more thought into it is basically what I'm hearing you say. But Harsh, I want to come back to the IT services.
Sure.
Right. And the reason as People Plus we are interested in that is because we are looking at India as a large. We are looking at, you've heard of things like Devin and, AI programmer agents, in some form. Devin is a very early prototype, but
Right.
I think in like 1 year later, there are going to be AI programmers.
Right.
And we have a huge IT services industries and, we have a lot of people here. So we need to find the next thing, right? And service is an excellent place because we have deep relationships. We're sitting in Bangalore or in India. We have done this before. What is your thesis on?
I think there's a huge opportunity for us in India, right? Because I think the value mindset is very, very, very product focused. And so, service is almost considered sort of, a bad thing. But we know that actually, despite all the progress on, enterprise, tool development and SaaS, that the IT services industry has sort of, continued to grow and thrive. And, banks and, pharma companies and other legacy businesses have, certain application and tools that, are so core to their business that, sort of, ripping and replacing them with a new player is, a huge challenge. So, I don't think, that changes overnight. What does change is the type of skill sets that are now needed to make it happen. Because, if you have sort of, your AI programmer, copilot, call it what you will, that can sort of, do much of sort of, the effort for you and get you 80-90% of the way there, then, a lot of this sort of, becomes easier, right? And so part of this is we have to keep expanding the market and hopefully, there will be more and more stuff to be built. I think part of it is we may start to see, some sort of, pressure on pricing and the likes that some of these companies are experiencing because, now you perhaps no longer need to send, a whole team that's, on site at, the client side in the in the US and the likes. And so there will certainly be sort of, change in the industry as we know it today. But at the end of the day, the thing that we also need to realize is that the IT services companies have very, very, very deep relationships with these enterprises. And so when the CIOs and CTOs and others are thinking about, how to leverage AI in the enterprise, they are one of the first few ports of call that will get made. And so one thing we encourage our companies to do also is to proactively think about, if there are ways in which, there are joint GTMs possible, there's something else that can be done where, you have a company, a product focused company that's sort of tying up with these IT services company that likes to take a solution to the end customer.
Some of these new age IT services companies, what kind of cost advantage do they think they have over, let's say, a TCS or an Infosys?
Yeah, I think it's very early days, so I
Sure.
wouldn't want to sort of, say that, this is...
What is the promise? What is it?
I think the promise is, 80-90% efficiency. I think that's sort of,
Wow.
the
And
promise.
even if they get 50%, that's a pretty
Correct.
good deal.
It's huge, right? And so, but they have to learn sort of the whole go-to-market piece of it. So, I think these companies will figure out sort of, how to build the application that the enterprises want from the technology perspective easily. They will sort of leverage all the advancements we spoke about in terms of what's happening with programming and AI. But, as we know in, enterprise, building the product is only one part of it. Selling is, just as important or perhaps sometimes even a harder part of it. And so building the relationships, figuring out sort of what it takes to get into these enterprises, I think that's going to be sort of, something that they will have to figure out.
Do you see like people, ex-IT services, people who are experienced jumping in and becoming entrepreneurs?
I wish we saw more.
That's a good thing. A lot of people
absolutely.
watching this.
Yeah, because, I think, again, going back to this part of sort of, somebody really understanding an industry, understanding what the needs are, understanding what the technology gaps are, actually folks in IT services are very deep on that. So, if you're a specialist that's been serving financial institutions, if you're a specialist that's been serving sort of, automakers, if you're a specialist that's been, like, you understand what's actually needed in this industry really well. And so if you can sort of, take that understanding, think about what's possible with AI and really come up with sort of, a new age product, I think that can be really compelling. So we hope we see more folks stepping out and building something interesting.
That's excellent. I think we have the talent pool and we should see that happen. So, Harsh, let's fast forward like 12 months, right? What do you think the AI landscape in India is going to look like? What is it going to look like in 2 years? What's your best guess?
I hope we see, frankly, see a lot more companies. I think we're seeing, a reasonable number of companies in India today, but I wish we saw more. And certainly we are, not quite at the level of what's going on in the valley, right? And I'm hoping things that will be enablers the next 12 to 24 months. The government has sort of, committed to investing a lot in building, data centers, with enough GPUs to make, many startups happy. And so I hope things like that sort of, take away some of the constraints that exist today, where everybody is hardware constrained, capacity constrained. I think some of those should hopefully be tailwinds. But if you ask me, I hope sort of, to see a lot more companies, both on the infrastructure side as well as on the application side. And then two, I hope that, some of the, sort of front runners in this industry sort of, get to a size and scale that is interesting. So they start seeing real use cases. We start, touching AI and, in many aspects of our daily life. And it really does become something that, not just has promise, but really sort of, is showing impact to each and every one of us.
You hope that it becomes really mainstream and
absolutely
like we use a mobile or a cloud.
Correct.
We take it for granted. This is fascinating. So if an entrepreneur is listening to this and they want to partner with Peak 15, how should they think about this? Like we already touched on some of those things, but how would you summarize? Like, hey, here are like a few things that you need to do before you come and walk into this room.
Yeah, I think one of the things that when we sort of evaluate companies, I like to think about is, this is a little bit inspired by Don Valentine, who's the founder of Sequoia, is the, why now and so what? Why now is, many good ideas have existed for a long time. We've had many smart people. Is there something fundamentally today that allows you to build this? And hopefully the answer for somebody that's trying to build an AI company is that it's enabled by what's possible with advancements of AI. So hopefully that's an easier question to answer. The second question to answer is, let's say what you're building and the vision of what you have succeeds. So what? Like, whose life does it change? How much does it change? Who's willing to pay what for it? Like, does this have a shot of building sort of, an iconic, legendary company? And, that's something that we spend time sort of, thinking through and assessing, saying, we are in the business of, hopefully backing some of the most important technology companies of tomorrow. And does this company have a chance of being one of those when they come in and meet with us? So I think that's a sort of, if I were to summarize, spoke a lot about the trends and what's going on, but I'd say those are sort of, two questions that having compelling answers to is important for us.
I love those questions. Why now? So what? I mean, it's a great.
Very
Yeah,
petty,
everybody
very
should
small, but if you can answer them well,
Very,
then you
very
have
kind.
something interesting.
So one last question, Harsh, regarding sort of regulation. Do you have any thoughts on it? I know India put out an advisory and then sort of went back on it or revised it. What is your view on what should be done?
Yeah, it's a tricky topic, tricky because you don't want AI to come in the way. You don't want regulation to come in the way of what's possible with innovation and advancement technology. At the same time, some of the stuff that you're seeing possible with AI today is fascinating and sometimes scary, right? Like, we've all sort of seen the deep fakes and, some of those things that are possible. Of course, people are consuming a lot of information that's now being provided by chatbots and the like. And so I think, if there's sort of, a sense of responsibility that players have, saying that if you are putting something out there, and this is perhaps more relevant to companies that really are consumer companies in some shape or form, perhaps less so if you're sort of, selling into an enterprise. But if you're a consumer company and you will sort of, what you produce, can influence and have an impact on people, I think it's important that you sort of, keep that in mind. And so the guardrails that you establish for yourself in terms of sort of, accuracy of information, in terms of sort of, disclaimers and the like, sort of source recognition, those types of things, I think are important. And as long as sort of, players understand the responsibility and do it well, we've seen sort of the intent of the government to support innovation, but I think we sort of need to sort of balance it with this responsibility in some ways.
So does that affect your investment decision making? Like, for example, if you're investing in fintech, which you also know very well, I'm in that industry, you have to factor in regulation. So one question, standard checklist question, entrepreneur, what about RBI? What about SEBI? You'll ask the question. In this, there is no regulator yet.
Correct.
Do you worry about it? Like, for example, in a B2B, presumably that's less of a worry, right? Because that's a little farther away.
Right.
But if a consumer play comes and they're like, hey, I'm not sure what the regulator is going to say about this, would you stay away from it? Or is that in your top of your mind?
It's not top of mind for us today. And again, I feel like as long as, you're doing, the smell test should pass,
course,
right?
of
Like,
course.
You should sort of, if you feel like what you're doing is right, I suspect that, the government also is trying to get smarter on what's going on in AI. And I think you have sort of, representation or case to make if you're doing stuff that is correct. But if you're doing stuff that can be considered a bit irresponsible, I think we would feel uneasy, irrespective of whether there is regulation or not. So I'd say that balance and responsibility, if you are building something consumer facing in AI, a founder should take reasonably seriously.
Got it. So you're looking for basic hygiene, sanity tests, smell tests has to be passed.
Right.
But that's true for any business, even without AI, right? You're not going to have something look shady in whatever the domain is. You're not going to touch it.
Right.
But for AI right now, innovation is more critical. So we want people to come in and try things.
Yeah, and we've seen the government be reasonably sort of agile and nimble. They put out something, there was the feedback from the industry, and then they sort of taken that.
That was
head
impressive,
of,
actually.
So, and it was all happened in the span of a couple of days. So I think if you're doing the right thing, I hope and suspect that we will get all the support. Everything from the infrastructure that's being created, regulation, but you would have to do some things that are done the right way.
Fascinating. I know I've taken a lot of your time. So thank you again. Harshjit Sethi, Managing Director of Peak 15 Capital. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Bala. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Intelligence Unscripted.